So we have a new episode today with sitting at John's couch, and today's topic is not really a bright topic, but we have to talk about it. So our topic is depression today. One of the biggest problems we experience in the society. It doesn't matter which country. So John McNally will be informing us about depression. So John, could you give us some general overview about depression?
So if you've ever been depressed, or if you're currently depressed, you know what this feels like. You already have this experience, and you're going to know that this feels terrible. It's like being in the bottom of a pit, which you can't find a way out of. This is what the emotion feels like. What I'm going to try to do in a series of videos on depression is I'm going to try to get you to see this from a slightly different angle, so that you can begin to take it from this personalized experience, bring it out of yourself and look at it as an object. And then from there, we're going to talk about how to maneuver with it to get away from it. Okay, so you've got the personal experience. It seems at this stage it's very tied to who you are. It's very personal. There may even be a bit of shame or guilt feeling about it, which is quite common. But I'm going to try to sort of separate that from you so that we can talk about it much more from a scientific perspective. Okay, that's how we're going to start. At the very first, what I want you to think about is what depression actually is. It's really a maladaptive strategy that the brain is using to try to tell you how to adapt to the world. It's just not working well. So if you remember from other videos, we talked about how the brain is actually a prediction machine. And what it's doing is it's taking the information from inside your body, including your thoughts at that moment, and coupling that with everything that's going on in the external world that it gets through your senses. And is bringing that in together to form a little package of information. And then what it's doing is it's going to tell the body how to react to that new information, what it has to do next. And in the case of depression, what it's doing is it's causing you to react in a very specific way. And it's kind of like hunkering down and trying to ride it out. So we've heard it before of the fight or flight response. This is more of a fight response turned inwards. That is, what you're now going to try to do is you're trying to try to hold on, right? Not do anything, and see if you can just ride it all out until you get out of it on naturally. That's kind of the brain's strategy with depression. The reason it's maladaptive is because it actually doesn't work. It doesn't actually get you out. What it does is maintain it. And that's why it's a maladaptive strategy. We typically learn this, the basic pattern is learned in childhood for most people. And then it gets triggered again as an adult. So if you're, let's say, a teenager or you're in your 20s, this will often get triggered by events around you, and your brain simply goes back to what it knows. So when we in my profession, therapists, look at depression, we look at it first in two clusters. One is called reactive depression, and the other one is a major depressive episode. Reactive depression, you will understand that if you go through any loss, like the loss of a loved one, or let's say you break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend, this type of loss can often trigger a depressive cycle. But it's based on a very specific event that has occurred. That's why you're reactive. It's called reactive because you're reacting to it. The other one is a major depressive episode where the reason for the depression isn't as clear. And there are symptoms that are tied to the major depressive episode that we'll talk about in the next video that will begin to describe how we define what depression is. So in the broadest sense with depression, if you think about it, two major categories: reactive depression versus a major depressive episode. And underneath that, we will get a list of symptoms. We get that by asking questions with the patient, and they will tell us what's going on, and from that we'll get a list of symptoms, and that's basically how we define what depression is. Interestingly, what's happening at this moment is this definition's getting shaken up a bit. And so it's no longer with certainty that we have a firm definition of depression. For example, the new research is indicating that there's a connection between the gut microbes in your stomach and depression in the brain. And we know there's the connection, we just don't understand how it works at this point. Also, there's evidence that depression is an inflammatory disease because we know that there is an inflammation that happens in the brain, but we're not quite sure of that mechanism. The other thing we realize is often, and I see this very often in patients come to see me, is that depression on the one hand will be the diagnosis, but on the other hand, they will also have an anxiety component to it. So these two are very often linked. And so you can think of depression now on a continuum, which on the one hand has anxiety on the one hand and depression on the other. And then somewhere in the middle is where people usually sit. So they come into my office, they present with symptoms of depression, but they also present with some symptoms of anxiety. And these two are often linked together. So right now, the definitions are subtly changing as the new evidence comes into being. And it may be that the old-fashioned way of just looking at broad symptoms, it may be that underneath it, there are actually different forms of depression, different types of depression. Maybe one that has influence by the gut microbes, another one that could be just inflammation-based. So we're not sure at this moment in time, but that's basically where we stand with finding depression. Thank you.
That's it for the general overview. Okay, perfect. We are changing the location now because it was so loudy. We had to run away there. So see you in a sec.